You know, that's actually a really good question. As far as if you go to the gaming store this week, what kind of RPG book would catch your eye and say, I have to buy this book? And this is going to be disagreeable between publisher to publisher, but the biggest thing that always catches my eye, and one of the things that we actively promote at IGRE Publishing is art. Cover art is one of the huge things that if you take a look at a book, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Cover art is worth 10,000, 20,000 easily. The moment you take a look at the cover of an RPG book, you usually decide within those few seconds, it's like, okay, this is rather plain, so I'm not going to take a look at this. I think that's where Pathfinder has such a strong segment of the market as it is, since, I mean, you have Wayne Reynolds working on that art, and it's just beautiful. Which that's true. Cover art is not essentially play by means. You can use the art to illustrate concepts within the book, but uh, you could have like the most solid writing inside your book. But if people are finding the cover ho hum, they just aren't immediately attracted by the quality of art on the book. You could run into the issue of people just, passing aside your book and something going after something that's more visually attractive at first, which is sad, but it's one of those things that does happen. I'm gonna have to be honest with you, and I'm not as familiar with Ravenloft as I am with, say, Dragonlance. Hello, Annika. Question of what cover art would separate the book. Um, what precisely would you mean by that? Yeah, precisely. Um, and that's one of those things when you're a publisher or you're just a writer. That's one of the things that you're actively looking for is that the visual element of the novel or RPG book or whatever you're writing really for the cover is strong enough on its own that it draws people to look inside the book, which is the hardest battle when you're out on the shelf. Um, Cover art can be deceiving. Yes, I would agree with that. Um, yeah, I mean that happens too. Um, but overall, one of the reasons that that kind of deception does happen is the more realistic cover art might have turned people off, where having that type of fan service, while the ethics of it is kind of out the window, it does draw people in. Um, like say for IGRE Publishing, we try to aim for something that if it's on the cover art, it's easily replicatable in the actual game system itself. Not everybody follows that, but um, as I said, it's something that really varies from publisher to publisher to how they handle cover art. Like say, Purple Duck Games have a pretty solid. You'll have a picture in the middle of the book, and the rest of it is like purple. It's a purple cover with a single strong picture in the middle of it. IGRE Publishing, we're going after a more full cover artwork. The image would take up the entirety of the cover. Um, No, don't turn off the classical. I love it. Um, I mean, actually, I'll even go one step up and let me link you something here.
Hey, folks.
Hello. Okay. And what's linked here, David, is actually the cover art of our core rulebook for Swordland RPG. Of course, we haven't finalized the actual logos yet for the book, but that's the main artwork that's going to be on the cover. Um, Honestly, I believe that's going to be a really strong visual image and impact when it's on game shelves, or like say you're going through drive-through RPG and you see that. That definitely catches the eye. Um, Thank you. That image is by Alexia Roman. She goes by Safi on DeviantArt, and that's her artist name, kind of like a nickname. Um, she's, yep, it definitely, it's a looker, so to say. um, Now, what else says you have to buy this book? Um, there's a number of things. Layout's going to be the other major thing. You want to avoid a very wordy tome, but at the same time, you don't want there to be little content inside the book in focus of pictures all over the place. There has to be a steady balance of, say, you have several pictures that illustrate concepts in the book, but then you actually have those illustrations and the book isn't just like, reads like an encyclopedia or a dictionary of just words, 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 no art. um, and then the layout itself has to be attractive, since if you just completely avoid, like, say, paragraphs and you're just have two columns full of nothing but just sentences, um, that also has a visual impact that can affect the sales of your book. Um, that's the other issue, is what's the book actually about. Um, and that one's really going to vary from what system you're looking at. Um, like, say, supplementary books, you're going to have more of a kind of pick and choose, because if one book has certain mechanics that work better than the main rule book for the system, you're going to go after that. Or if there's different classes or, you know, options. Um, those are all going to vary from book to book, and mainly as a publisher, you try to go and put as much content out there that people can pick and choose. Um, and you're always going to suffer loss from that too. Not every book's going to sell as much as one would.
You could be louder, Erik, and you're getting tinny.
Hmm.
Your line is now muted. Your line is now unmuted.
Am I coming in better now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
I don't know what's the question. What does this book have that I can use? Oh, that so much begs a Dr. Seussian answer. That's just, this book has pages, this book has a cover, this book has a...
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, really, when it comes down to it, when you're looking at it from a publisher's end, um, really you got to go with what's selling the most. Say people really want options for clerics or paladins, so you're going to be putting out those options for clerics or paladins. If people don't want stuff for the ranger immediately, then you're not going to go write a 300-page book about rangers, because if you do that, then you're wasting resources towards going what people want.
I mean, if you have the resources to spend,
Yeah, which,
if you're not bound by that, it really doesn't matter.
yeah, exactly.
Most people in the industry are. That's just the reality.
Yeah, which, I mean, if we were all Wisos and pot or Paisos, that wouldn't be an issue. But for littler guys like us, that's kind of one of those things. Um, Usually, I try to keep an open dialogue with people that are actively interested in IGRE Publishing's content. We have an open playtest forum where people are, giving feedback on the rules and mechanics themselves, letting us know what options they want to see. Right now, one of the things people are really interested in is Swordland has a mass combat system baked right into the combat rules. So in combat, it's really kind of scalable. So you can go from party versus monsters to whole army versus army, and like the scale mechanic doesn't go wonky when you're like trying to track initiative for 50,000 different guys. And one of the classes in Swordland called the Captain gives you major buffs when you're in that mass combat scenarios. So people were really interested in seeing that and what kind of options that had available. So of course that's like our priority is showing off the Captain class in the playtest and its options available. Then you just got to.
That's true, David. I mean, sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
But I mean, there's a lot of a lot of options for paladins and on the steampunk world. It seems to be the genre du jour, the steampunk right now. But at the same time, I mean, it's there are. I mean, when you're looking at something like a Pathfinder, I mean, unless you're like Savage Woods is a much more pulpy thing. You can go in a lot of different directions and dissect a lot of I mean, there's 3 different pirate settings in Savage Woods that I know. There's 50 Fathoms. There's Freeport. There's Spanish Main, right? But they're all basically the same thing. They're all pirate settings, but they're differently. Okay. That's much harder to do with something like a Pathfinder. I mean, there's a steampunk setting out there called Terra. Right? I mean, you could probably the thing that Wolfgang Bauer put out. What the heck is that one?
Oh God, it's on the tip of my tongue.
But it has some steep elements too as well. I mean, it has like constructs in it. I mean, so you can kind of say, well, okay, that's steampunk fantasy, but it's really hard to make like a big setting because I mean, it's a Pathfinder setting. They all tend to be pretty big, right? And it's really hard to. I mean, big setting. I mean, there's a lot you got to put in there, and it's sort of like this is a steampunk setting. You can't really dissect it because you need all those pieces that you would put in like the 3 different pirate settings for Pathfinder. You need all those pieces just to make a setting that size.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know what I mean? You can't specialize because you wouldn't have enough material to make a setting that size. You need every piece you can get. Although I would really like to see a Pathfinder archipelago setting. You know what I mean? Like the strings of islands, like almost Waterworld-ish. That I think would be kind of cool. But
yeah,
I mean, they've got their Carillion thing. That's more or less underwater. I mean, like they already have some pirate stuff in Galarian to begin with, right? But I mean, it's really hard to make a setting that big, and then make another setting that's sort of like it but not because you've already used that piece.
Yeah, exactly. And say like Pathfinder there, with the Galarian setting, that's one of the reasons that we like to keep our settings kind of vague. I mean, like for IGRE, our main setting's called Helios, and I mean it's defined that there's 4 to 5 continents, and here's like the basic layout of each. But the campaign setting would kind of focus on that, and the customs and your major towns locations like that. But when it comes down to the really fine, like regional, like here's all the dungeons or all the caves, all the landmarks, that kind of thing, that's the kind of stuff that we'd leave to adventure modules within that setting, where you can actually establish, okay, this is where cave A is, this is where dungeon B is, where you would waste a ton of space in the core like setting book. And that way you have a lot more flexibility. Someone using the campaign setting book can say, okay, there's like dungeons all over here, when in the official like module, there's nothing over there. So you
would you be going linear there or Nexian? Would you be going linear there or Nexian?
Well, to be honest with you, it's a pretty much sandbox setting. I mean, there'd be various modules coming out that just gives you a whole bunch of options. Like, I prefer something, say, keep on the Borderlands versus something really linear that limits player options going from place to place. So you always want to, or at least in my mind, when you put out a module, you should have something that, there's like 10 to 15 different locations that you can visit within the module, and then you have various reactions to however the player party goes and accomplishes their goals in the module. So say you have a kobold infestation at Dungeon B. If the players don't handle the kobold infestation, they just go wander about doing everything else, then all of a sudden here come the kobolds raiding all the friendly villages that were in the area. But if the player party goes and deals with that immediately, then they don't have that major of an issue. But then you might have another different element of that module come up and present a challenge later on. So having that kind of economy really kind of makes things more fluid and feel more world-like. You get a feeling that there's an actual consequences to what your party does during the adventures.
Fair enough. I mean, I with the time of the linear module, I kind of think that's kind of coming to an end. I mean, it's good if you have not GM before. Like, if you're a rookie GM, that's fine. And maybe you do need those to get you, to like bring you up to snuff on how to GM.
Yeah.
I mean, just me, and just from what I've experienced, and just what I've heard when I've talked to other people who are experienced GMs, they don't tend to use the linear stuff. They might take different facets from it. They might take different facets from it, but they don't tend to. I mean, they tend to like the Nexian stuff better because it gives them more options as to where to go, and it makes it more sandboxing. I guess maybe sandbox is the kind of GMing method that you have to grow into. You can't really just start out, boom, I'm a sandbox GM.
In a way,
it's not an easy thing to do.
And that's like kind of a debatable thing, because when I first started out, like, I had those linear modules, and like I read through the first few pages in my first session. It's like, actually, man, I should have read this earlier. This is kind of boring. So I decided, I'm just going to completely just try winging it. And then I found out I preferred winging it more so than the linear adventure that was provided.
At what age was that, though?
For me, that was actually 18. So, I mean, I had, the capability of doing something like that for like a beginning, like, 10, 8. I mean,
12 years old. I don't know if you could do that at 12.
Yeah, which is one of those things. It depends on the level of creativity of the GM. However, on the flex side of that, one of the problems with linear adventures is, say, the ever-present question of, okay, the party was supposed to go right and now went left. If the module doesn't provide the left-hand answer within the module itself, then you run into the issue of the GM who's now just starting out. What do I do here? Do I just try to railroad the players back into going to the right regardless? Which is
I know older GMs today that have a problem with that question.
yeah.
I mean, they're still there. You know, I know ones that are very good with sandbox, but I don't know. I just think, just me, but I think there's just a preference of older, more experienced players for the sandbox method, because I think by the time you've played for quite a while, I mean, you're just kind of sick of the, yep, we have to go down this road and this road only. It's boring for you.
Yeah. And actually, that's one good point that David just brought up. One good thing is to have 3 modules in play, so if the players go left, they can wander into another module, which is something that would work out, actually. Going from my own experience, though, when I was younger, I was really huge in, like, say, the Elder Scrolls series, and that was amazing. Just like when you play in that game, there's like hundreds of locations that you can just wander to. Some of them, might only be 1 room, 2 rooms, but there's just like so much exploration you can do, and that was something that I always kind of tried to emulate when I did role-playing games. And actually, at this point, other than having a major regional map of the area that I have my player parties in when I'm running a game, I really have nothing else planned, like NPCs on the fly or dungeon rooms on the fly. Which, I mean, that's something that you kind of gain with experience, and that's definitely not for everybody, but usually my amount of planned material, unless I have a dungeon that I came up with that I really wanted to run, I generally just let the course of the evening take me where I need it to go, as far as entertaining the players, instead of trying to adhere to a strict modular linear base. Of course, again, that's not for everybody. Some people do like the kind of play right out of the box familiarity that the modules give you. So it comes down essentially a lot to player taste. If you like just being able to create your own world, then by all means go do it. But if you need something with a little bit more structure, then modules are the best way to go in that regard.
I'll give you that. I mean, to me, I do maintain that it does come to an experience, which is not. I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere, so that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, you know what? You're a linear dude, and you're only 16. Well, that's good to you. You don't want to, you have to start somewhere. I mean, no, everyone has training wheels on their first bike.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that having that much structure kind of does serve as a set of training wheels. It kind of show, the younger GM, okay, this is the kind of CR you put up against this party, the kind of toughness that this party is. That's the kind of challenge that is suitable for that. And I think that's a really big thing. This is about the amount of treasure they would get for an encounter with that kind of feature.
Yeah.
I mean, history is full of history. I mean, there's stories out there that everyone's heard them and everyone's seen them and everyone's probably been a part of them. The Monty Hall GM, the killer GM, and a lot of time that has nothing to do with the person so much as they don't really know how to balance those things, and that's what the modules teach: how to balance character ability versus CR, and how to balance treasure versus the challenge.
So that's definitely one of the things I do agree with their balance as far as like treasures. One of those things that you also gain with experience. I mean, the core rule book can give you so much, and I mean, you can go by what the rule book says, which is generally what the rules were written for. Though that's not always applicable. You might run into the GM that's like, you wander into this room and here's 8 magic +1 swords that are just lying in the middle of the room, which has happened before. But that's something that you generally tend to uh, grow out of, I guess, in a way when you play the game more and you realize how it works. Of course, then again, you always have varying play styles. Some people just like, having a really ridiculous, silly game that situation is possible. Though in other hands, more serious games, you have players that, will go like 20, 30 sessions without finding
that comes with experience.
Yeah.
Right? That's the really big thing that linear modules teach a younger
GM. Yes.
Is those things.
Which is something I definitely agree with.
You know what else? You were just mentioning magic items, and I don't know what maybe it's just the people I play with, but you know what's really fallen by the wayside? The cursed magic item. Do you remember the last time you went into a dungeon and found a cursed magic item?
And that's actually...
Or whatever.
But anyways, yeah, like a situation I ran into was a Friday night. One of the players in that game had come across a basically legendary cursed dancing sword. And there was artifact level that it speaks and talks and all that. So it told that player not to let anybody else in the rest of the party to leave, and none of us, the rest of the party, knew about this. So the player tried to drop hints, and then my character, I just decided, well, he's just standing there talking to this sword. This is crazy. So I'm going to go look else for treasure. And then all of a sudden, here comes this sword dealing like 70 damage to me. So that was a bit crazy. Cursed items are fun, and I actually do like having them. As you're saying, there does need to be a reason for the cursed item to exist, and who made it. But then again, that logic can be applied to any magic weapon. When you're dealing with something that has those properties of it's just not a mundane sword that anybody can find. When you have like an actual magical item, there should be at least a little bit of backstory behind it, so you're not just focused on like the +1 or the +2. If you actually have somewhat of a backstory behind that item, even if it is just a mundane +1 longsword, that gives the players that much more opportunity to roleplay. Like, you can use that as a hook mechanic to figure out why this sword was in the dungeon, that kind of thing, or...
You're right. You're right. As History of Any, that's a really great plot hook for a GM. Really great.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, some of the stuff you said, like, okay, the logic of Christmas has been questioned. You have to have the back. And I think part of the problem with cursed items again is, it's almost too easy to identify them.
Yeah, when you...
I think maybe.
Black Blazers like Jerusalem, and they don't like you.
It's like, okay, I'm a magic user, and like, for instance, a Pathfinder, and I've got like, Knowledge Arcana +8, and I throw an Identify skill. Okay, now it's a +18 modifier. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, most times for identifying a magic item, it's a DC 25. I mean, if you're getting a +18, you don't even have to roll 50% to hit that, right? I think maybe that's probably part of the reason why we don't see so many cursed items up there. It's just too easy to suss them out.
Which is true, and I mean, you have other options too, like wizards have identify magic item, which, that's easy.
Yeah.
Or clerics have identify curse, which pretty much the other kill for any kind of situation like that. And I mean, once you realize, oh yeah, this is cursed, well, let's not use it, let's just sell it then to some other poor fool.
We're not touching it.
Yeah.
You have an item which has a curse that gradually comes into effect. So you have a sword that's a good sword, but as you use it, it gradually, does, brings in more monsters or what have you.
Or it makes you more willing to kill.
Stability ring.
You don't want to kill.
Stop it. Yeah, like it's really like in the Hobbit, you put on, you don't know it's first. It's good, makes it good. It's only gradually that you realize what it is.
That's a fair point. I mean, again, that's not a bad mechanic to use.
And that's actually
for every full slain with said sword, it has say a 1% chance to attracting random monsters. You slain 100 people with the damn thing. I mean, it's like every time there's a roll, you're gonna get something. It's like why the heck are all these things here all the time?
Of course, that's another thing that's kind of the website, though, is random monsters, random treasure. Things are now more predetermined. So actually, like increases the treasure you find or increase the random monsters don't make much sense anymore.
actually.
Like if you find an area, like there's a certain number of monsters around there, and there's really no reason why you're going to have an extra 50 orcs show up because there are only 25 orcs or 75 orcs, whatever, in the area anyway. So.
That's actually something I could immediately say for the modules for Swordland once we start rolling them out. Actually, we do have wandering monster tables or random monster tables. I mean, the general guideline is there's like a listing of, say, in our first module, you have the cons are essentially kobolds. Then you have bandits wandering about too. So there's like an active population listed in the module of they're at this location or they're at that location, and that's how many of them are in there. There isn't really an identification of when each single room where they're all at. So it's kind of up to player taste to put them as they want. But there's also the tables for, okay, if the party's just kind of sitting in a particular spot too long, and you have a wandering monster check, here's what's going to show up if they sit around, like in the cave with a dragon in it by chance, all of a sudden here come related drakes flying in, using the same cave as a nest for them as well. So there's always usage for that, and it's one of those things that modern systems are kind of shying away from, but it is something that for the sandbox feel, I think it really adds a whole bunch of flavor to have those random monster tables in there. And I mean, you can also even like random treasure tables too, which essentially for the most part, that's always been the case. You've used random treasure rolls to determine what you find in a loot pile. Most modules now do just have your limited pre-picked stock, but we give you the option to either use that or just roll something else up if it makes more sense for what your party's doing.
Try to make a ultimate system of random magic items, and so a lot of work, but it could be quite interesting.
In a way, it is a bunch of work, and that's one of those things you have to kind of balance on when you're putting out the module, especially in our case. Like, we do list what's going to be in the area, like you said there. You use the tables to populate the area. We already pop the area for you, and then you can just kind of either pick, like, the predetermined locations, or you can randomize it a bit. But
one thing that makes random encounters be, in the outside, there's a chance that you'll encounter, merchants or, patrol soldiers, travelers, pilgrims, etc. People moving through the area. They don't actually have a table for that, but she found some idea for that. So yeah, maybe that was.
Yeah, and that's one of the things when you're dealing with intelligent beings like that. Like, if you're using humanoids, you do get more option as far as like throwing in random monster B or C. Like here, you have all these human bandits that somehow managed to capture a random drake that they're now using as kind of protection for their group. and are maybe using it for scouting patrols or whatnot. There's usually a way that if you have humanoids that are the main aggressors in a module, that you can write whatever random monster you want in there and have it somewhat flow in the Guardian mini boss role in a way. Let's see, looking.
Bandits, that's another thing I was thinking about. I think in Fantasy World with bandits would be more like the train robbers of the Wild West. They wouldn't be out there looking to ambush people, but they'd be in the towns or in their hideouts very carefully planning what they were going to do and when they were going to do it. So you're probably, if you would probably not randomly encounter bandits, or if you did, they probably would not act like bandits. They just act like just anybody else. Only if the bandits were deliberately planning to do a lot of robbery at that time would they be hostile. Primarily because in a fantasy world, there's just too many things that could just, kick the bandit's ass. So any bandit that just goes out there trying to steal from random passers-by is going to have a very, very short lifespan in the Dungeons and Dragons world. So if you want to be a bandit with any sort of lifespan in a D&D world or Pathfinder world, you really have to plan what you're doing ahead of time and know what you're doing and not deviate from your plan.
Yeah, which is one of those things that comes up. Usually when I've run bandits, I've kind of, like, if you've ever seen the Mad Max films, then again, I've always kind of run a apocalyptic fantasy type setting, so for the most part, there's lots of large tracts of land that there's not very many civilizations in, so you could get by with your bandits just kind of waiting around for the average Joe to walk by and then just mug him. But at this...
areas that run into orcs and kids and high-level adventurers, I mean, Mad Max bandits, I think, would last very long in a D&D world. Because there's so many things out there that just to be so much more powerful than you are if you're a bandit. I mean,
Yeah, well...
If you find out you attack, you just try to bug Conan,
Yeah, which there's always the ability to run. Everybody can run. But that's the other thing, too, is that's one of the ways that we run, like, humanoid monsters, or humanoids, essentially, like, say, your average humans, dwarves, whatnot. Most of them do have active bases of operation, and you do see them, for the most part, trying to play it safe. You don't see very many of them just ambushing whatever comes on the road, but you see them more or less just hanging out in the hideout and then ambush like a major target in Massey. Like, say, here comes like a payroll wagon, then all of a sudden that payroll wagon's been hit by like 30, 40.
I mean, that's the whole modus operandi of a bandit, is to attack a target when it's at its weakest. I mean, often they let the terrain do the work for them. They pick their spots, and usually the spots they picked are places where whatever they're attacking is vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
It's susceptible to being ambushed. Whether it be a narrow gully that the trail runs through, or a set of woods, or maybe it's in a ford that they have to cross, or a bridge that
Yeah.
gives them. They pick their spots. That's the whole methodology behind it. Hey,
Yeah.
Jonathan, how's it going?
Which is one of those things, especially when you're using intelligent creatures like, say, the humanoid bandits here. You're going to see them use more actual tactics than, say, like trolls or goblins that are just going to swarm and attack a target. Like, if you run across a single bandit or two, that's usually a scout you're coming across, or a really bad idiot wandering away from the rest of his group. But by the time you see a whole bunch of these guys, then you're in a situation that you're going to be already on a bad side of, like, say, crossing the bridge situation. So really it comes down to how the GM utilizes what resources he has available, because, I mean, we could take a look at the Tucker's Kobolds scenario of, here come the 9th, 10th level 1st edition D&D characters wandering into a dungeon with all sorts of followers, cohorts, and then they utterly get annihilated by just 10, 15 kobolds that are using murder holes and cover positions, various traps. So if a character or monster has an intelligence, then there's ways to use that intelligence for their benefit to give your players hell, in a way.
Let's face it. If you're looking at goblins or kobolds or any other monstrous humanoid, especially the lessers, anything say under an ogre, usually what you're talking about is attack by numbers. Right. It's not a question of tactics. So it's the question of sheer number of enemy. Whereas the difference between that and the bandit crew is usually the bandit crew is it's the party that is outnumbered, right? They're usually talking 6 to 8. Usually, there are other instances, but usually you're talking 6 to 8 bandits versus 60 to 80 goblins. Goblins are obviously easier to kill than most bandits. When you get it, like I said, when you get into your monstrous humanoids that have a little bit more brains, they don't necessarily need those numbers. They're a bit tougher. Obviously, sometimes you'll see a group of goblins augmented by hobgoblins and even bugbears, which is then where you get sort of a combination of, okay, maybe the goblins in and of themselves are brainless cannon fodder, but the other ones standing at the back, they're going to wait until the goblins, expose. Reads Jonathan, they're going to wait until the goblins expose the party they're attacking, the weakness of that party, where they're vulnerable, and then those bigger members of that raiding party are going to concentrate on that. Right? Does that make sense to you, Eric?
Oh yeah, definitely. But it does come down to the various ways you use the tactics of whatever monsters you're running. Like the bandit situation. That's one of the things too, is like I've always modeled bandits, like you usually have like a smaller band of like anywhere 10. Most cases I actually have like a general population of about 20 to 30 in an area working together in a region. So you see them using more guerrilla tactics to win victories, where if you come across something where you have like a local goblin population, you do have like you see those guys using more mass swarm tactics, where you have other creatures that are going to be using intelligence to pick out the best time to attack a unsuspecting party. It's David has a thing here about mist encounters, which is actually one of those things that's really fun. You can always add those in as a side note. That kind of adds in more plot hooks to your campaign, especially like the dragon flying overhead. That's probably been something I've used in every single game I've ever run. But so that's one of those things that you see a lot of publishers put out that kind of information as just kind of like supplementary material, and not actually usually put within a core rulebook or whatnot. Though modules often will include those types of options in them. Actually, there was one recently I was playing through a 4th edition module where you're wandering through a desert, and there was all types of that stuff going on, like skeletal dragons flying about, and then you come across the corpses that were lying on the ground, that kind of stuff. So, those are options that you can throw in them. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but you can throw those options into the module if you're the publisher, but then it's also, you have the ability as the GM to just throw that stuff in it as you see fit, which is one of the best ways to utilize those, because if you have a situation where there's no dragons in your campaign whatsoever, having a dragon flying overhead is not something that's going to work if it's written in the module, but then just change it to, okay, you have giant eagles in your campaign instead, so instead of a dragon, okay, that's a giant eagle flying by. or there's tons of different scenarios you could throw into that, like your random boxes and barrels of a supply train that just recently got ransacked and killed off by our previously said bandits. Or you could have a situation where you've come across somebody that also killed a dragon before you were able to reach it, and you just came across the carcass of it. The immediate plot hook of, okay, who killed these guys, and what are their intentions? Are they good guys or bad guys? So that's stuff you could always use to add flavor to your campaign, or even generate a whole new adventure based off of it.